Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Trucking with Authority. I'm your host, Kenny Long, and for the next hour, consider me your navigator on your journey to success in the trucking business, especially the trucking business. We can talk about anything from getting started as a driver to be buying your first truck, becoming an owner-operator, leasing to a carrier, changing carriers, leasing to a new carrier, getting your own authority, pulling freight under your own MC numbers for the very first time, what it takes to find freight, working with load boards and brokers, negotiation. We always talk about negotiation, and we will bring up some more tips again tonight as promised. We can talk about dealing with the FMCSA, dealing with insurance companies, record-keeping requirements, you name it, we can talk about it here on this show. Dial the number at the bottom of your screen, 917-889-9924. That's 917-889-9924. For those of you that might be streaming this while you're driving, please go ahead, turn off the video. You can listen live while you drive, 917-889-9924. No sense in getting any tickets out there for using a device, watching a video while you're driving. So I like to throw that disclaimer out there because I know people have admitted to me that that's exactly what they've been doing. I think it's great that we have access to all of these awesome things, the mobile connections the way we do. We all have supercomputers that fit in our pockets these days, but we don't need to be getting tickets that would be disqualifying events for most insurance companies just because we want to watch little old me on your dashboard while you're going down the road. So again, go ahead and call the number on your screen, 917-889-9924. Don't even look down at your screen. Use their hands-free calling. Listen close, 917-889-9924. Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about maintenance, fleet maintenance, owner-operator maintenance, truck, trailer maintenance, you name it. That's what we want to talk about today. Some interesting things have come up lately. We've been trying some new things around here at Patriot Star. We've been updating some software and some programs, and it has brought up some interesting information as we've gone from one truck to 20. And it's important to understand what you need to know as a single truck carrier or just an owner-operator leased to a carrier. If you add trucks, what you need to be watching out for. And certainly if you have owner-operators where they are responsible for the maintenance, what they need to be reporting back to you. All of these things are super important, especially today when insurance prices are through the roof. These are the types of things that insurance companies really look at closely when they are getting ready for your renewal and they're trying to figure out what exactly they are going to charge you. So it's important to understand the very basics of a maintenance program, what you need to have, what you should have in place, how often you should service your truck, your trailer, and so forth, and how you should implement different policies for your company. So we want to talk about that tonight. Before we get into that, though, tonight, and again, once you call the number at the bottom of your screen, 917-889-9924, press number 1 if you have anything you'd like to add, any questions, comments, anything you'd like to add. We'd love to hear from you. This show is all about you, and we've been going strong since 2014 because you keep coming back, and you are the one asking all the questions. Looks like we have several callers on. We've got several people watching on Facebook, and I don't even have the YouTube stream up today. I will go back to the YouTube side here in a little while. I will take questions and comments from the phone lines first. If I have time towards the end, I will get to anything that comes in from the various video streams and social media. That being said, tonight I am going to be prompt. We're going to shut things down at 8 p.m. exactly. We're at 7:04 right now. I will be trying to watch the clock. The phone lines will be closed at 8. I will try to get to every call that comes in before 8 o'clock. But if you happen to be on hold when that 8 o'clock hour hits, Unfortunately, we'll have to resume this next week. So get your calls in early. Again, dial the number on the bottom of your screen. Press number 1. Elizabeth is in the other room screening calls. This works just like a regular call-in talk radio show. Don't be nervous. She will screen your calls, get your question, explain to you how this all works. But it's very simple. And if you're too nervous, go ahead and ask her the question, and she can relay that to me. So we've got several callers on, several people watching the live stream. So awesome. So before I get started on that, how many of you have been watching the average rates this year? I know I watch this stuff like a hawk. I am all over it. And it's been an awesome year. And I don't think anybody can deny that it has been an awesome year. I mean, just phenomenal year. We started out strong in the first quarter. January, February were unpredictably and unbelievably strong for that time of the year, especially in the flatbed segment, who are typically slow that time of the year. Record-setting vans and reefers held strong. Here we are going now into the third quarter. Second quarter is behind us. Second quarter held strong. Those rates were, still well above everything that we had seen previously, and they just keep continuing on the rise. But last week was one of those holy cow moments, especially in the van segment. So I'm looking at the DAT Trendlines report right now. DAT Trendlines shows a month ago, so the midweek in June, we averaged about $2.30 per mile for the vans. Third week of June, we inched up to $2.31 per mile in the vans. The last week of June, $2.32 per mile on average for the vans. Those are really, really strong numbers for a van. So please take advantage of it while you can get it. Be cautious and understand that, at any time the market could correct itself. Now, if I would have said that the last week of June, and you all would see the number for the first week of July, you would have cracked me over the head, because the first week of July jumped 13 cents to $2.45 per mile. Of course, that had a lot to do with the holidays, with the 4th of July landing midweek. Really screwed up a lot of things for the trucks, the shippers. Everything was messed up. Those midweek holidays are really unpredictable. Some shippers were just all closed all week. Some were closed the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Some were closed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Some just had, short shifts. We've got some factories just completely closed down doing retooling. We've got a lot of things going on. It's the summertime, very typical. But $2.45 per mile for a van. A year ago, that was a dream rate for specialty freight. And now we're getting that on general freight in a van. That's awesome. So as a carrier, you should be taking advantage of that. Now, flatbeds are holding strong. $2.82, $2.81, $2.82, $2.82 respectively, week over week. Steady for the month of June and into the first week of July. Not a huge uptick for the holiday there, but they are already bumping the ceiling, I believe, at $2.82 per mile on average. Now, I'm going to come back to how they calculate these averages. It's important to understand they are averages. I know there are a lot of people screaming at me, I would never, $2.82 a mile. I'm doing way better than that. I believe you. We'll come back to that. Reefer is another strong one. 270 4 weeks ago, 273 weeks ago, 269 the final week of June. Jumped up again 8 cents for the first week of July for the July 4th holiday. $2.77 per mile on average for the reefers. Super strong there as well. Obviously, all three segments have been record-setting, and I think all three are, I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, it's just phenomenal. But getting back to how they get these rates, what it's important for everybody to understand is DAT has agreements with literally thousands of carriers and brokers, okay, that submit their actual rates. Now, the way they do that is DAT is able to, through API, through the back door, so to speak, of their TMS systems, they're able to pull the actual invoices and actual rate confirmations and so forth out of their system. So the actual amounts that are billed by the carrier, the actual amounts that are billed by the broker, they're able to pull that information in. It's very, very difficult. It would be almost impossible for a broker or a carrier to fudge those numbers, because those are the actual programs that they use for their bookkeeping. This is what they send out to their customers. These are the invoicing programs that they use. So they tap into the backside of that. And one of the big comments I get from this all the time is, well, they didn't get my rates. My rates are a whole lot better than that, and my rates aren't part of that. They are tapping into thousands upon thousands of trucks. This is the average. Yes, some are higher, but yes, some are also a lot lower. We have contract rates still in effect from a year ago that may be a lot lower. And we're seeing some, lane averages that are a lot lower, but we're also seeing stuff that are spiking a lot higher. The average works out to what these numbers are. So the average for a van is $2.45 per mile. Now, I see these comments on Facebook, and I'm going to just go off on this a little bit. Oh, everybody should haul above average. If that's the average, nobody should haul for that amount. The flaw in that way of thinking is it's an average. If everybody hauled for more than average, the average would go up. And if we kept thinking that way, the average would go up again. And of course, that's, I guess, their way of thinking is if everybody continues hauling for more and more and more, we'll always get more and more and more. But I was telling a story today to a good friend of mine that was here in town about one of our customers on the broker side. We have a good relationship with them, and they work with some specialty type freight. We had to quote them some rates back a couple of months ago for another holiday shipment that they were working on. And our quote, and it was a team load across the country, and it was way too high. It was about 3 times higher than what their target was. And I called several carriers, and I got a lot of numbers, and I said, well, I might be able to get it down, if you give me some time. I mean, they wanted a quote a couple of months ahead of time. If I can get the right carrier in the right situation, maybe I can get it for, my target was about twice what their target was. It was still a lot higher than they wanted to pay, more than they had in it. And ultimately, they went down and rented a truck and moved it themselves because it was cheaper for them to do that. At some point, there is a ceiling to these rates. At some point, we can't charge whatever we want because the shippers will go out. They'll find it more cost effective to have their own in-house trucks. Shippers can move this stuff a whole lot cheaper than we can do it. A whole lot cheaper. And they will jump on the backhaul bandwagon and be using brokers to get back to their home base. In a lot of these cases, they could, with the rates that we're seeing today, they could probably deadhead back in a lot of cases and still save money. So that's why I said in some cases we may be bumping the ceiling. Now, shippers understand that this is a cyclical market and things will correct themselves. I do think that we will see some more increases over the next few months as we close out this year. But as we come into the end of July and into August, a lot of shippers are going to start renegotiating contracts. They're going to try to lock in current rates. So we're probably not going to see huge spikes going forward toward the end of the year. We may see the holiday spikes like we did this past week of a few cents just for the 1 week, but then we'll see a plateau and we'll see a leveling out. So I don't see a lot of huge things changing in the near future. Although in the very near future, over the next few weeks, be prepared for rates to dip. And this is just a trend that happens every year. Again, we have a lot of factories that have slowed production for the summer, or they've taken a couple of weeks off for retooling. If an automotive factory shuts down for a week or two for retooling, then the entire downline from that, so all of the suppliers to that and the suppliers to the suppliers and so forth, takes a lot of the freight off the market. That tends to happen mid-July and into August. You start to see that domino effect of that gap in the freight market kind of closing in, and we'll see a slight dip in the rates as we go through July. And it's not just automotive. I threw that as an example, but just about every industry will have some type of retooling or a slowdown or a shutdown of production, usually in the July month. So we'll see that affect the entire freight market. I don't expect it to be huge this year because capacity is still really, really tight. We still have more loads than trucks across the country. So we will see it dip. It'll slow down a bit. One of my trucks today said for the first time ever, he's going to deadhead into a better area because he wasn't getting the calls that he wanted. So that means that we're already seeing a little bit. It does tend to happen the week following the 4th of July. So we will start seeing that this week. So it bumped up, and just using vans as an example, it was at 230, 231, 232, and then last week bumped up to 245. I expect it to come down again to at least that 232 mark, to equalize that little spike there. Probably dip down into the 220 something range, maybe by the end of the week or the following week. So we will start to see things come down. That being said, as we move into August again, we'll start seeing things ramp back up for the end of the year. And of course, as we get closer to September, October, you start seeing more Christmas rush, and obviously October, November, and certainly just November, December, we see a huge push with Christmas rush and the package delivery companies taking a lot of the available trucks off the spot market. So that's kind of how the rest of this year will probably play out. I expect the rates will still be very, very profitable for a carrier or for an owner-operator, but I do think that we have kind of hit a ceiling so far. So just be prepared for that. All right, so, excuse me, I've got a little bit of a hoarse in my throat here, so. Again, if you have any questions or comments, looks like we do have a couple of comments on the line already. If Elizabeth can get into screening these calls, and I will get to the calls here in just a minute. Call the number at the bottom of your screen, 917-889-9924. Press 1 on your keypad. That will raise your hand in the green room, and Elizabeth will screen the calls and will bring you on the air with your question and comment. All right, so I already got a comment about that and I'll go on this tangent. And I don't know if he's being sarcastic on this or if he just wants me to point this out. But Bill says, don't forget it's only looking at the loads that fall between the 25th and 75th percentile, so the averages are only looking at 50% of the freight. What he means is they take all of the loads that they pull in, and they throw out everything above the 75th percentile, throw out everything below the 25th to throw out any outliers. So they're only looking at 50% of the freight. They're not necessarily looking at 50% of the freight. What they're looking at is, and the way it was explained to me, let's say you have 4 loads. You have one that's $1.50, one that's $2 a mile, one that's $2.50. With those 3 loads, the average would be $2 a mile. But then the 4th load, let's say that's $5 a mile. Well, that 4th load, just looking at the trends, is an outlier. It's way out there in left field because it's so much higher than most of the rest of the loads. What they do is they take those extreme outliers and they narrow that down. That's why they throw out anything above the 75th percentile and anything below the 25th. So they're not looking at only 50% of the freight, but they're looking at the majority of where the averages fall. So they're throwing out the outliers. Yeah, and that's what he says. No, being real, they do that so we don't have outliers. Exactly. But they're not looking at 50% of the freight. It could be, if there's one load that's out there in left field, then that's the one they throw out. But I see what you're saying there. Okay. Now, I want to talk about a maintenance program. It's super important. This came up a couple of times for me this week. One of my drivers, and I know he's watching, he has a brand new 2018 trailer. He's got disc brakes on the trailer. And so we're trying to put together our, and collect our maintenance records and reports and everything for all of the equipment that's leased to us. And he has 0 zero maintenance records for this trailer. Reason being, it's a maintenance-free trailer. Now, he has annual inspections. He has the required stuff, but he has not had any scheduled maintenance. There has been none required, so he has nothing to show. And excuse me, I keep turning the microphone down when I'm coughing, so you don't have to hear that. But so he has nothing to show there. There are no maintenance records. He gets his DOT inspections done. He gets, if he was to get a roadside inspection right now, I'm sure he would pass it. That particular trailer doesn't have grease fittings because it's got the new style disc brakes. There's no slack adjusters. There's no brake adjustments. There's none of that. So that this trailer is essentially maintenance free. Now, trailers in general require very little maintenance anyway compared to a tractor. But it's interesting that it's completely maintenance free. It's very rare that you'll see any equipment that requires virtually zero maintenance. Now, he's going to have to check his tires. He's going to have to do the routine maintenance stuff that everybody has to do. Brakes will have to be checked eventually. That'll come up during his annual inspection. But they're really, other than his daily pre- and post-trip inspections, there's really nothing required of him. Now, the tractor, on the other hand, is another story. Every truck out there, every tractor out there has oil change intervals. You've got filter change intervals, air filter, oil filter, fuel filter, and so forth. Now, one thing that I want to caution everybody about is the concept of maintenance free. Now, that trailer, it really virtually is maintenance free. There's really nothing that you have to service on a regular interval other than just checking some stuff out. But a tractor is another story. Now, I've recently talked to some owner-operators. Again, I said this came up just this week. The trailer, that's maintenance-free, and then somebody approached me and said their tractor is maintenance-free. The problem with their tractor is they were told that there are no grease fittings anywhere on the truck, which is completely incorrect. It's true that there are no grease fittings on the U-joints. We confirmed that. But there were grease fittings on the slip joints of the actual drive shaft itself. I have seen these slip joints actually rust and freeze and lock up. And it causes all kinds of mayhem on your rear ends and all kinds of things. But if you are convinced that your truck is maintenance free and you don't have to get normal grease intervals done, you're mistaken. Because I guarantee you I've yet to see any tractor out there anywhere that has zero grease fittings on it. I've yet to see one that has zero grease fittings for kingpins. That's one of the biggest wear items on every truck are the kingpins on your steering axle. Of course, you've got your tie rod ends, drag links, all of your steering components. All of those need to be greased. Most trucks still have drum style brakes with slack adjusters, also requiring grease. Some trucks, the newer trucks in the past few years, are starting to come out with, and it's actually getting to be a standard option on some trucks, with the disc style brakes. Some of those systems are completely sealed and don't have any maintenance intervals, and yet some still do. The reason I'm bringing all this up is, in addition to these maintenance-free items, we also have super extended oil change intervals. So out of the factory, without any modifications, some of these engines are calling for 50,000 mile oil change intervals. And that's awesome. That's great to keep your costs down. The problem is all of those other components I just mentioned get neglected, because if you only go to the shop to get your oil changed once every 50,000 miles, which might be once every 6 months for some drivers, or even less for some. I know some drivers that might be an annual amount of miles. And if that's the case, you're not getting any grease on any of those other components, and you will have failures. So the topic tonight's show is maintenance matters, keeping your equipment and your profits rolling. If you have an extended drain interval type system or a maintenance-free drive shaft, U-joints and brakes and so forth, don't forget about maybe they've narrowed it down to where they've gotten rid of almost every grease joint except for one. Don't forget about that one, because that one is important enough that it could put you in a shop and you could miss that next good paying load. So develop a maintenance program and policies to implement in your company to make sure that even your maintenance-free items get checked on a regular basis. All right. And I'm trying to periodically, let me turn these volumes down so we don't get some feedback here, but I'm trying to periodically check on some of these comments just to make sure everybody's following along. All right, so every company needs to have a maintenance policy in place. So how often do you get your inspections done? Who is going to do your inspections? And it could be just as simple as it just has to be a certified inspector, or you can narrow it down to a certain shop. The company needs to specify who and how and when each inspection gets done. If there are repairs that need to be done, ultimately those repairs need to be documented well. So the carrier is required to have all of the documentation associated with every piece of equipment. Now, I can tell you this, the insurance companies would like to have a carrier to have every single receipt, every speck of information about every truck from the time that it had the first mile on it. And what they would like to see is when an owner-operator leases onto a carrier, what the insurance companies would like to see is that owner-operator takes their maintenance folder that has every receipt from the first mile and hands it to the carrier, and the carrier now maintains it for them. And every receipt going forward, the most basic stuff, you put in a gallon of oil, you change the windshield wipers, you change a headlight, or you have tires put on, brakes put on, all of that needs to be documented with a maintenance report. Who, what, when, and where, how many miles were on the truck, and any associated receipt. That's what the insurance companies would like to have. Now, I'm going to take that back a step because I've reviewed this over and over and over again. For an owner-operator based company, now if you have owner-operators or if you are an owner-operator, it's really not practical for the carrier to maintain those files. Obviously, certainly not any of the original documents. So any receipts that you may have, it's not practical for the carrier to maintain all of those. It would be wise, it would be beneficial if every repair made was sent along to the carrier, but it's not really required. But a report of, again, who, what, when, and where, and how many miles were on the truck is required. Again, insurance companies would like that monthly, but quarterly, semi-annually, and so forth would work. The more often this maintenance is reported to the carrier, the better. And here's the reason why. If a truck is in an accident, and let's say they get annual inspections and they get all of their records sent to the carrier annually, and the 364th day, one day before they were just about to send their documents into the carrier, they're in a fatality accident, and it's the driver themselves that's killed. The records didn't get sent. The maintenance reports didn't get sent. The carrier goes to court. How are they going to prove that anything was done to the truck? Who, what, when, where, why, what was broken? There's no documentation to back that up. There's nothing to back up to say, yes, this was maintained on a regular basis. How can you show that if there isn't a regular reporting period? So that needs to be done on a regular basis and needs to be adhered to. So that's actually one of the things that, again, here at Patriot Star, we have been a little lax on, and we're tightening up those screws now. And I'm kind of learning some of this as I go, and I'm trying to relay it on to some of you. I've always had a maintenance policy in place. We do 120-day inspections. We get our maintenance reports there, but I was not as hard of an enforcer of it as I probably should have been. So in some ways, that has hurt us as a carrier. So we are trying to tighten that up, and I'm passing that information to all of you. It's super important to make sure that all of those records, all of that maintenance is documented and done correctly. I've got another question. We're going to change gears here just for a moment. It is the first week, or at least my first show here for the month of July, and 2290s are due. We're going to go to Ken, I'm assuming here in Florida as well. Ken, can you hear us? Welcome to the show.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. How you doing, Kenny?
Good. What's on your mind?
I'm up in Virginia I'm in Virginia going down 81. 2290. I got 2 trucks, 2 trailers. I decided I didn't want to do the employee thing, and I'm going to sell a truck and a trailer.
Okay.
I've already updated my the FMCSA. What's the form that you update every 2 years?
The MCS 150.
I've already updated that, and to one and one, and
Okay.
me as the only driver. But that truck is sitting. I've done. I did a fictitious bill of sale so I could take it off of my insurance, because found out if you have a truck, no matter what, it has to be insured. So
Correct.
I got it sold, but I still have the truck. I got a bill of sale. So, but that said, the 2290, from what I understand, that still has to be paid, or can I carry that over to the next, to the buyer?
Okay. It used to be that 2290s were tied to the truck. That's not the case anymore. You would not have to pay it if you're not putting it on the road. So if you're just parking it, you do not have to pay it.
Okay.
It's a highway use tax, and if you're not using the highway, you do not have to pay it. The next driver or the next owner will have to pay that before they can put license plates on it. So you're good for that. Now, if you did pay one, you can get a refund on the amount, and you can also kind of transfer it. Really, it's not a transfer. They refund one and issue another, but you can also do that as well to transfer to another truck. So if you paid mid-year and sold your truck, or paid and then sold your truck mid-year, I guess is what I'm trying to say, you can get a refund on the difference. So the 2290, it is not transferable with the truck anymore, stays with the owner.
Okay.
But you can get the refund on the difference. But it's not required if you are not going to put the truck on the road anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't paid that yet. I was going to do that here in the next couple of days, so I only need to do that on the one truck.
Correct. Yes. And then as far as trailers, for anybody listening,
I'm driving.
There's nothing required on that for trailers.
Right.
Tractors only.
Yeah, I knew that.
Okay. All right.
Right. All right. Well, that's all I had, and I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to y'all soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you for calling in. All right. Bill was making comments on Facebook, and I kind of addressed some of that, but I am going to bring him on because he wants to argue with me, I think. Bill, you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Kenny. How you doing?
Good. How are you? You want to correct something I said, is what the note said.
Good. Oh, I didn't want to stomp on you.
It's all right.
But according to the FMCSA, and if you go through a DOT audit, they will, in the monthly maintenance reports, receipts, or as a carrier, you're required to keep the receipts. Now, your insurance company asking for stuff before the carrier came on, that's just crazy people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's not required. But so if you separate insurance company and if you go through an audit, and more importantly, is if there's a roadside inspection and a repair needs to be made, that's really what they really dig down in and look at is, do you have the receipts to show that the repair was made?
Yes. Now, how about this? This is what everybody gets to me. And why don't you introduce yourself, first of all, and explain why you know what you know?
Bill Hood. We ran a trucking company. Yes, the infamous Bill Hood. And since I left the carrier after I sold it, My wife and I have started a safety and compliance consulting. I've been to a couple DOT audits, but my wife is the one who goes out when a carrier gets in trouble and represents them with the DOT. So she's been through quite a few of these things. And when typically we see audits, they're coming in, they're focused audits, they're looking at a carrier gets in trouble, rarely gets in trouble for one item. Typically it's maintenance and hours of service. So they will come in and they will specifically look at the carrier's maintenance files and inspection history and what has happened with the inspections after or what has happened to the truck after they failed a inspection.
Okay, so here's the question that I get all the time. Drivers that do their own work, how should we document that?
So there's a couple things there when you're documenting, you're looking at your own work. So the first piece we'll do is we'll take a look at annual inspections. You can self-certify. So the FMCSA now or I should say DOT officers and audits are getting much more critical about the annual inspections, and they're wanting to see the certification of the person who did the work, that they are. I kind of laugh about it. They're qualified. You can self-certify and say you're qualified, and apparently that makes them qualified. But if you go into a TA, a Petro, a Speedway, or wherever. In the past, people would just say, well, we just assume that they're going to be qualified, but they're wanting to see that anytime you have that. And as a carrier, you should be keeping that documentation to protect yourself. So that's the one side. So if somebody's doing their own annual inspection, then you want to make sure they self-certify that form. And I can get you copies of forms if people do that. So the other side, if you're doing the work yourself, you need to document that on your monthly vehicle inspection report the carrier is required to keep. And so let's say we're talking about, you just did greasing on the truck. Well, you're not going to typically have a receipt. You probably have, when you bought grease, you bought a case of it and you have it sitting around. But if you're talking, you bought a gallon of oil or a windshield wiper or anything that you go to the store and get and bring back, you will have a receipt for that, and that needs to be included in there. And as a carrier, you want to make sure you're keeping that, not just because the FMCSA, but what you were talking about with an accident. If you're not showing that you have that you're requiring this documentation, you're going to get, or your insurance company is going to get crucified on that stuff from a plaintiff attorney.
Absolutely. Okay, so how can people find you?
You can reach out to us at best thing to do is info@velocitygroup.com. That's VLOCITY group.com, and that'll come to either Lori and I, and we're happy to answer questions. And we got a lot. I mean, most of the forms any carrier will need from the compliance side, from a driver file all the way through drug and alcohol policies. We have sample leases. We have everything. We've got all that stuff. We're getting ready to put it up on our website so it can be downloaded, but we'll happy to give that out to anybody who needs it.
Okay, I got a question from Facebook. It says, do you need to be self-certified to add oil and wipers and basic stuff like that?
No, you do not. No, you do not. It's the certification has to do with the they're going to talk about doing brake inspection and repairs, showing that you're qualified to do that. So if your brakes are out of adjustment, they're going to want to see you're certified to adjust brakes or the person who fixed them. And they're going to specifically ask for that certification if you go through an audit and they're looking at the repair on the brakes with the roadside inspection. So the brakes and then the ability to do the annual inspections. Everything else they don't ask for, they don't require certification on.
Got it. Okay, so it's info@velocitygroup.com, correct?
Correct.
All right. That's I just put the link there, or the email address, in the comments on the Facebook group. Again, so can the driver do their own annual inspection? And that's what you were just talking about there. That you could be self-certified. What are the requirements to be certified?
Fill out a form. That's why I say it's kind of ridiculous, because you sign off saying that you have the experience to be able to do this. Now, the caveat I'm gonna put here from a complete safety perspective, as a safety company. If you're a carrier and you have trucks that are leased onto you, it is you want to be very, very careful about letting people do their own inspections, especially if you don't get visibility on the equipment, because like I said, you can go and self-certify, you can go and buy the forms, you can do everything. So someone's trying to save $100 a year and they're not actually doing an inspection. So that can get a little dicey from a carrier's perspective. Now, as a former carrier and having drivers that I would entrust my grandchildren in one of their trucks, because I know how good they are. As small carriers, you know the guys you can trust, and you know the ones that you probably need to question, but it takes time to build up trust. So I'm not saying, I don't think that should be a blanket policy, you need a third party to do it, but you want to make sure the person, as a carrier, the person that's doing it really is doing it.
Okay. And for everybody out listening, they are a one truck and pony show here. They could probably get away with that, but something that I suggest, and even myself, I do a lot of my own repairs, I still go to a third party for the annual inspection, because there are things that, we all drive the trucks every day. We get used to that squeak in the door and how we zip tied that one thing to that other thing to make it stop doing something, and that's fine. And you overlook it when you start doing your own repairs, but then the actual certified mechanic will look at it and just be shocked that you would ever try to go down the road with something like that. And, so I think it's good to have a third set of eyes on it anyway. So I always try to put a third party in the loop.
Yeah, and I mean, you've probably seen this now. It's one of the biggest frustrations I had as a carrier was, and even as a driver, you pull into some of these places and you wonder what you paid for, because it seems like they're just looking for stuff to repair, and the things that don't make them money, they just kind of look over. We had a guy day after he had an annual inspection get a violation for not having the reflective tape on the back of the cab. Well, what's that inspector doing if they don't have a checklist going down and looking for everything? As a carrier, it gets frustrating to want to make sure you have the trucks going through places that are actually doing a quality inspection. So that was always my struggle, is, how do we know these trucks are good when they first get here?
Right. Well, I can kind of add to that. I know when I was leased to one of the bigger carriers, they had a policy where if you failed your inspection, you were not even allowed to so much as pull the truck out of the bay. It would have to be on a tow truck if you wanted to take it anywhere else. The problem with that was the inspectors knew that, and they could write you up for anything they wanted, and you were at their mercy to get it fixed. So if it was a tire shop, you better believe that you needed tires every time you got a DOT inspection. But if they don't know how to do mufflers, you could go in there with, the exhaust falling off, dragging on the ground, but they'll pass that because they don't do mufflers. So that was always the issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, so exactly. All right, Bill, one more time. It's info@Velocity Group. And I'm sure they could find you other places as well. You have a Facebook?
Oh, yeah. Facebook, it's Velocity Group on Facebook. Obviously, you can search for me out there. I'm in your groups and most of the groups there, so we're around. And if people have questions on getting their authorities, we're actually doing our first trial new authority training for people wanting to set up authorities tomorrow. So we'll be doing that on a weekly basis as well.
Good luck with that. So that should be fun.
Yeah.
Just wait for the phones to start ringing. So
we do about 20 to 30 new authorities a week, so we've gotten pretty used to it.
Yeah, and at last count, I think we're close to 300 applications are submitted nationwide every single day, which means roughly 300 new carriers are on the boards every single day. So, going back to what we were talking about with rates, at some point this will equalize, and new carriers are jumping on board. Some are not necessarily adding capacity; they're leaving carriers, getting their own authority and so forth. But there's big changes happening in the trucking markets right now.
Yeah, we're only seeing about less than 20% of the people who apply for authorities actually go active. So, but I think those numbers kind of hold true from when we were seeing an average of 100 new authorities a day. So, yeah, we're definitely seeing more carriers go active right now.
Awesome. Okay, Bill, I appreciate the call, and stay in touch.
All right, keep up the good work.
Thanks. All right, so, and I know we have another caller on here, and Elizabeth hasn't screened it yet, so I'm going to let her get to that at the, if she's listening. Actually, she may have fallen. My call screener may have fallen off. Where did she go? No, there she is. All right, so we'll wait for her to screen these last couple of calls. Let me catch up here. Where are we at? All right, so let me see. All right, so going back to maintenance reports and maintenance on your equipment. If you have the type of equipment that has a lot of maintenance-free components in it, be sure you're addressing the components that are not maintenance-free. Drive shaft slip joints, even if the U-joints themselves are maintenance-free, the slip joints a lot of times are not. There are still some brake components, depending on what types of brake systems you have. Slack adjusters, the S-cam bushings, all that needs to be greased regularly. If you happen to have some type of grease fittings on your disc brakes, make sure those are done. One other highly neglected, and especially if you're going extended drain intervals, one highly neglected grease point on a truck is the throwout bearing on your transmission. It's typically a little rubber hose that hangs down. That hose goes all the way up to the center bearing up on top behind your clutch. You can't access it anywhere except for usually underneath the truck, that little hose that hangs down. A lot of times drivers that grease their own trucks and things, they will grease things that they can reach from outside, but you really have to climb underneath there to get stuff like that. And there's also a lot of times clutch linkage and so forth that requires grease, steering linkage that requires grease, the steering components that require grease. I have never seen a truck that didn't have at least some grease points on it. Grease is your best friend in a truck. If you imagine taking two pieces of steel, rubbing them together, it's one thing if you're in a 2,000-pound automobile, but you get in an 80,000-pound truck and those same two pieces of steel rubbing together, they wear out very, very quickly. But you put some grease between them, and it'll last you the life of that truck. So be very, very careful and diligent about greasing your truck on a regular basis. If you look in your owner's manual for your truck, it will have recommended maintenance intervals for all of those items. Those need to be your minimums. To add to that, for those of you that might be running an older truck that has all kinds of grease points, but then you make modifications, such as you might go from the greasable U-joints to a sealed U-joint, or maybe you add a bypass oil filtration system and you go from your 15,000 mile oil interval changes to 25 for a filter and maybe indefinitely for an oil change. Most people never get under the truck again. Those are the ones that you tend to see just crazy amounts of brake out of adjustments, clutch linkage and so forth that you really have to be under the truck to inspect. Make sure you're following all of the routine maintenance schedules for that. Dave Casanova, I'm going to throw this out there as well. Dave is one of the reasons that I am going to be cutting this off exactly promptly at 8. Dave is going to be going live on his YouTube channel, Columbia Glider Dave. Check him out. He has been leased to me. He's coming up on his first full year leased to us here at Patriot Star. He is going to talk about his numbers and his experiences here at Patriot Star. So check out his channel on Columbia Glider Dave on YouTube. He's going to dig deep into his numbers. He's done it a couple of times before throughout the year, but now he's got a full year in review, so that should be interesting. I'll be watching too because I see what I write, the checks I write to him, but I'd like to see what he's got at the end of the year. So, and excuse my voice. It's I've got a horse in there somewhere. All right. But Dave was mentioning that your maintenance report, your monthly or quarterly or however the carrier decides that they want those reports, that maintenance report should have an outline plan. So each owner-operator should specify what their maintenance intervals are. So if the truck goes in for a grease and lube job every 5,000 miles, that should be specified. And each owner-operator can have their own maintenance program, but it has to fall under the minimum standards that the carrier recommends. So it's very important that all of those things are itemized. Dave has a pretty cool form. I don't know if we could share it out in some of the groups, but maybe we can get a generic one that we could share out in some of the groups. But it specifies at what intervals you do what type of service. And beneath that, it's got all of the who, what, when, where, and whys of the service performed. So what did you have fixed? Where did you have it fixed? What was the mileage? And so forth. All of that on one single form. All right, so we're going to take another call here. We're going to go to Vern in Colorado. Vern, welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. What's on your mind?
Hey, Kenny. Greaseless fitting. I have a Cascadia that has a bunch of greaseless fittings, especially on the brake equipment. And early on with this truck, I used to have constant problems with my brakes. Slack adjusters locking up, all kinds of stuff. You know what? The best thing I ever did was I had a garage install Zerks on all those greaseless components and start greasing them. I don't have problems with my brakes anymore.
Yes.
So just because you've got a greaseless fitting and you don't have to mess with it doesn't mean it's a good thing to have.
All right. Let me go on. Let me talk about that for a minute. Some of those sealed components, especially slack adjusters and some others, oftentimes they come sealed from the factory and they have a limited lifetime before their first service interval. So they may be good for 3 to 5 years before you have to, so quote unquote, break the seal on these sealed bearings, and you have to put grease on them. Almost all of them have a spot where you unscrew a little plug and you screw in a grease fitting, and from then on you can start greasing them. Now, once you grease it the first time, you have to go to a routine interval to make sure it's always greased. Once you break that seal and you start pumping grease in, the grease can continue to leak out, water and other contaminants can get in, and they will fail. They'll last a long time. You know, usually in the first year or two, you don't have any issues with them when they're installed properly. But as soon as you put grease in them, you have to make sure you continue putting grease in them on a regular basis.
Absolutely. I do extended drains on my oil, and I try to get in every 10,000 miles or so and have everything fixed.
It's a good idea. It really
Keep
is.
Water and crud out of your stuff.
Absolutely. And I have a spare truck that I rarely ever drive. And I, at this point, have gotten to where I put grease in it every time I drive it, because although it doesn't move, it does sit outside. And what's interesting is, even if I'm not even driving it down the road, if I let it sit out, and I haven't run it in a month or two, I'll go out there and I'll put a couple shots of grease in each little Zerk, and I will see droplets of water being pushed out of the fittings. So that water seeps in and it sucks into those bearings, and it will cause rust, corrosion, and quickly you're going to have a failure and premature wear on your components. So what happens is you end up having to either you get an inspection that you fail. That's what we were talking about with Bill a while ago. Or you end up having to go into the shop and you might be down for 2 or 3 days, all because you didn't spend 5 minutes just putting a little grease in.
You betcha. Hey, great talking to you. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much, Vern, and thanks for the support. All right. Let's see here. We've got... And I see Mimi just joined, and she is the one that that kind of hinted that I do this show. And I had actually a list of things I wanted to talk about other than just greasing components. Other things that you need to be aware of is keep an eye on your tire wear. Tire wear is a big indication of not only tire problems. It could indicate, obviously, inflation issues, a broken belt in the tire. Could also indicate loose bearings, an alignment problem, spring problems, bushing problems. Your tire wear can tell all when it comes to your suspension. Keep a real close eye on all your tire wear. Make sure your tires, all of them, are wearing nice and smooth and flat across all surfaces. If not, find out why. Oftentimes you get inner tire wear, you get some weird river wear, especially on steer tires. That can indicate much bigger problems. If you catch those problems early, sometimes you can save the tires, which could be hundreds of dollars a piece, or you can get these problems addressed, such as it may be loose bearings. Well, loose bearings can be fixed in just a few minutes, just tighten those bearings up. But if you continue to run them, you could damage spindles, you could damage the bearings, could be thousands of dollars in repairs. So keeping an eye on simple things like that, checking your tire pressure, not once a week, but every single day, and not with a hammer or one of those baseball bat thumpers, but actually get out there with a gauge and check it every single day. Another good product to have is a tire pressure monitoring system with a gauge that checks your tire pressure in real time as you're going down the road. Even if you have one of those, though, I recommend you pull those off every once in a while and still put a gauge on them and make sure that they're still accurate. They could be super handy to prevent major issues. Running the proper oils is another good important tip. Make sure you're running the recommended oil or better. Trucks that were designed 20 years ago, which are engines that are in glider kits, they might be in a newer truck, they're designed for a certain type of oil. New oils, if you've ever noticed on the back of the bottles, there are different types of oils now. Make sure you run the recommended type, quality, quantity, and grade and weight of oil. A lot of people out here are trying to chase fuel mileage. Be very careful trying to put different types of oils in your engine just to chase fuel mileage. I can promise you that it probably won't even be a measurable gain, but you may see measurable wear on your engine doing such a thing. So be very careful with that. Oil additives are another thing that you have to be careful of. Oil additives, they sound great in the ads and the flyers that they put out, but there have been additive companies that have been sued for millions of dollars because their products were shown to actually cause problems, not fix them. So be very careful putting additives in. Your oils come with everything they need. Just use a good quality oil. So be very careful with that. And do your research if you do decide that you want to use one of these aftermarket additives. I don't recommend any of them, but if you do decide you want to use them, go ahead and do some research on it first. Filters are another one. Pay very close attention to your
90 seconds.
To your engine air filter, obviously. Don't always just look at the little vacuum gauge to go off of when you need to change your air filter, but actually take a visual look, make sure you're seeing light through it, or if you have a foam type cleanable air filter, make sure you're cleaning it, the fleet air filters, make sure you clean it on a regular basis, use the proper amounts of oil. That's going to keep you out of the shop. Just today, I see my good friend Tom is watching or listening in right now. Just today, Tom was here to, he sold his truck and I was here to help him with that. And he was showing a driver where the cabin air filter is. And the driver didn't even know there was a cabin air filter. So if you don't know that, just about every truck from the early 90s on that I can remember has some type of a cab air filter. Some are under the hood, some under the dash. There's usually one in the bunk. if you know where that is, that can save you. First of all, it'll make you more comfortable because your air conditioning and heat will work properly, but it can also save blower motors and other components in there as well. Windshield wipers, use the proper size windshield wipers. There's a lot of interesting windshield wiper technology with motors on them and heaters on them and all that. One thing to keep in mind, though, is all that stuff adds extra weight and mass to that moving device, and it all comes down to usually just a tiny little marble-sized wheel with small little grooves on it, and those will get stripped out very easily by putting the wrong size and type windshield wipers on. So Elizabeth brought me water. Now, I sent her a message back because I was coughing and gagging almost an hour ago, but at least she did it. She got it to me.
I've been working, taking other business calls, sorry.
So now I don't have to turn my mic down because I have water to wet my whistle. So just in time. That being said, thank you all for joining us. We're at the top of the hour. Remember to dream big, aim high, strategize your plan, earn your success because only you drive you. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And remember to catch Dave Casanova, Columbia Glider Dave, on his YouTube channel. He's going to be talking about Patriot Star and review his numbers for the year. Have a good night, everybody.